Today we are going to tackle one of the most important, influential, and ultimately controversial topics that we can discuss: religion. I know that supposedly religion and race and politics are topics you shouldn't talk about, but here we go. And let's be honest, perhaps our polarized political climate and misunderstandings about different religions and racial issues really come from a place that we don't talk about it. So, let's talk about religion from a historical lens. I'm not going to tell you to follow one religion or another or critique different belief systems. I just want you to be educated, and I want you to understand these different cultural beliefs. And for the sake of Jesus and Muhammad and the Buddha and Confucius and everyone else, that you analyze what their teachings were instead of maybe what got institutionalized by different governments over the years. But aren't all religions the same? I'm going to stop you right there. No. I feel like this is what uneducated, simple-minded people say. And I mean that in a really nice way. Are there similarities? Absolutely. Do they look for meaning and purpose in life? Yes. Do they turn to a higher power? Often that is true. But to say that they're the same overlooks each religion's uniquenesses and beauty in an effort to not get in a debate and pretend that they're all the same. It's like people who say, "I don't see color," to prove that they're not racist. Really? If we're sitting at a restaurant with a diverse group of friends, you wouldn't see that my friend is black? Do you just show everything in one single skin tone? Some strange Instagram filter embedded in your eyeballs? I'm not thinking so. In the same way, these simple sayings overlook the beauty, the uniquenesses, the differences between varying beliefs and experiences. So there you have it. We've tackled religion, race, and a little politics. So this should be good. Let's dig into Judaism. Judaism began nearly 4,000 years ago in the Middle East, specifically in the land around Ur, or ancient Mesopotamia. If you were going to pinpoint the beginning of the story, you would look at a Hebrew man named Abraham. Jews believe that God, known as Yahweh, revealed himself to Abraham. The story goes that God promised him that he would make him, Abraham, into a great nation and that he would bless them. He also promised them actual land. In class, we're going to kind of circle back to this idea, as you may be vaguely familiar with the idea of the promised land and the tricky modern issues with the literal land of Israel. The promise in the relationship between Yahweh and Abraham is known as the covenant. It's this special relationship based on reciprocal love and loyalty. Think of it like a promise to have each other's back. But not just for Abraham, but for the entire Jewish community. You see, Judaism is a monotheistic religion, meaning they believe in one God, Yahweh. All these teachings and stories are written down in the Tanakh, which is actually a Hebrew acronym if you were to break it down, which stands for the Torah, which are the first 5 books of Moses, and then also the book of the prophets, and then other writings as well. Often the Torah is famous as it outlines the story of God or Yahweh's relationship with the Jewish people. It discusses people like Noah and how Abraham migrated to the land of Canaan, or Moses leading the people out of slavery in Egypt, along with instructions about how to worship and give sacrifices and right living. Also, the Torah, those first 5 books, were memorized and recited orally for generations before it was actually written down, which is pretty impressive. I've seen people mess up the Pledge of Allegiance, which is 31 whole words, which is much less than the 5,800 verses, full sentences in the Torah. So where do Jews worship? You need to remember their history began as frequently being forced from their homeland and migrating to new lands. So they worshipped wherever they were. Around 1000 BCE, they built a holy temple in Jerusalem where they worshipped. Unfortunately, the Babylonians then came in and destroyed it in 587, and many Jews again fled the land. Remember Cyrus the Great, the Persian king? He allowed the Jews to return to this land, and then they rebuilt that temple in Jerusalem, making it known as the Second Temple. However, the Romans came along and then destroyed it in 70 CE. some 500 years later after it was rebuilt. They did this because the Jewish people were rebelling against the Roman Empire, which obviously they weren't a fan of, and many Jewish communities were massacred and were barred from the city. It's not been rebuilt since then. Today, many Jews travel to Jerusalem to go to the Western Wall or the Wailing Wall, which is the only remains of the Second Temple, and it is held as a holy site. Today, Jews worship in synagogues or temples, which are Jewish prayer and learning spaces, and their leaders are known as rabbis. Within Judaism, there's a lot of different branches or sects. For time's sake, I can't get into them all, but if you hear the word Orthodox Jews or Conservative Jews or Reform, those are the basic divisions, the biggest being between Orthodox and non-Orthodox movements. These branches differ in how they interpret Jewish law and the idea of the Messiah. If you were to rewind to the times before the Second Temple was destroyed, some of the Jewish religious branches included the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Essenes, and even eventually Christians, which again we'll talk more about in the Christianity video. The major beliefs of Judaism focus on this covenant relationship between God and his people. They have several holidays that commemorate events in their history, such as the Passover, which celebrates their freedom from slavery in Egypt, and Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement, where the people were made right before God through prayer and fasting and sacrifices at the temple. On that note, during the time of the First and the Second Temple, there were various types of sacrifices, including grain and burnt offerings and animal sacrifices. This doesn't happen today since there is no temple, but the goal was for the people to draw near to God. Think of these sacrifices as a means of obtaining forgiveness and were used as a symbol of the people being repentant. Do know that these offerings could be eaten by either the priests or the people offering them, and before PETA gets involved, if you eat meat, animals dying is kind of involved in them. Jewish beliefs were diffused all throughout the world, but not because people converted to Judaism. It isn't a universal religion that seeks converts. Simply, the people who were Jewish moved to a new place, because throughout history they had been persecuted by various groups. Babylonians, Romans, Christians later in history, and during the Middle Ages, and most infamously with Adolf Hitler and the Holocaust. Many people say this happened because Jews focused on remaining a separate cultural group rather than maybe taking on the religious and social customs of their conquerors. Since we are looking through a historical lens, we need to remember that Judaism is one of the oldest religions in the world. Judaism was very patriarchal for sure, with women having different responsibilities than men. Women's role was clearly as wife and as mother and as keeper of the household. Women couldn't be rabbis, traditionally speaking, but there are very famous women within Judaism in the story of their faith and in their holy writings. Today, many Jewish branches also allow women to be rabbis as well. We could dig so much deeper into this, but I hope this gives you a good overview of Jewish beliefs. Thanks for tuning in. If you find this helpful, give us a like or subscribe below. Also check out the other videos in this series about world religions.